Hello, Kyle here. I am here to talk about the series Halo as a whole and then also the season finale of Halo. Now, one of the videos I was putting out on this channel was the Halo TV series, and I was putting out episode by episode videos. I stopped doing that. I think it was around episode 3 or something. One of the reasons why my voice started to go, so I was starting to be unable to film YouTube videos. But the other reason was I also was not as thrilled with how the show was going. So I decided to wait until the final episode drops so that I can give my full thoughts of the series as a whole and what I thought. As you may have seen, if you're watching this video, the Halo discourse, specifically the fans for this series, has been quite divisive. And I would say that a lot of that is deserved because, as I will get into it, this series has a lot of problems. On the other hand, I still think that this series was an entertaining season of television. I have seen far worse series, The Book of Boba Fett being one of them, that I think that this was still better than. But I will say that the show itself has many flaws. And as I get into this series review as a whole, I think I'm going to split it into two parts. The first part will be reviewing this series as just a normal series of television, regardless of what it's based on. The second part of this video, I will focus on reviewing this show as a Halo show. And that is where a lot of the problems do lie. But first off, I want to get into just as a series as a whole. So the first episode I thought was pretty good. It started off with Master Chief becoming acquainted with this character known as Quan. And she was picked up off of this planet, and the orders by the UNSC, the governing force of the series, were for Master Chief to dispose of Quan because she was a witness of things going on there, and they didn't want her being just this innocent bystander that saw something, which was the relic in the show, and they didn't want her to be like leaking this information out. And it is something that we've seen before. It had a little bit of a Mandalorian-esque element to it, with Master Chief vying to protect this child, even though she was more so a grown young woman. But still, I think the first episode gave us an interesting premise for the series. And unfortunately, I don't want this to come across as, just a real negative thing to say. But I felt like the first episode was misleading because that was not the series that I feel like we got. And the whole element of Master Chief protecting this girl and revealing his humanity to this girl and having to go and, go against his governing body, that really kind of is forgotten and becomes more of the show becomes more of Master Chief kind of learning about his own humanity in the UNSC. He drops Quan off at this planet with his old pal Soren, who was an old Spartan that defected. And then the series as a whole begins to focus primarily now on just Chief in the UNSC dealing with his own issues. Soren and Quan then kind of become this side plot of the show that honestly detracted from the show itself, because the characters of Soren and Quan, while they are interesting and fascinating characters, they're not given a lot to do, especially Quan. And I was very disappointed because I really liked where they were going with her character in the first episode of the show. I did not like what they did with her as the series progressed, and to the point where a lot of this show kind of started to feel like any other science fiction show with all the same tropes of, paranoia within this government. They are doing some shady things. The people have to work against the government. They have their own set of lies that they're being fed. It became I want to say repetitious, but it just felt like every other show that I've seen. It did not have its own uniqueness to it. That being said, I think Pablo Schreiber is a outstanding actor, and he did a great job as Master Chief and John 117. He really, I think, commands the screen. You can sympathize with him. He's incredibly, I would say, not really charming, but he's incredibly captivating to watch. He's someone, when you're seeing him on screen, you really say, like, this is a leading man. And most of the cast, I would say, also is very good. I think that the actress that plays Dr. Catherine Halsey is pretty good. I think that the actor that plays Jacob Keyes is really good. Miranda Keyes is great. I think the Spartans are all good. And I think what's also cool is Cortana is played by the same actress, Jen Taylor, who played Cortana in the video games. And I think that she is also very engaging in the show, and I really like Cortana in this series. I think I might save the Cortana discussion for the second part of this video, but I will say, going into this show, I felt very concerned with how Cortana looked. And if we're talking about strictly for a show separated from the game, I think that her design in the show was really good, and I think that it really helped define the character and also differentiated itself from the game to be its own thing. I've seen CGI in certain aspects. Like, I remember the last couple of days there's been discussion over the She-Hulk trailer and the very poor CGI used in that trailer. I think that Cortana here looked great. The CGI in the show actually was pretty, well, I would say most of the time it was pretty good, but sometimes, especially in this season finale, which I'll get to, it was a little bit wonky. Sometimes characters were moving way too animated, like they don't look like they're moving like a human. But most of the time I think the CGI was pretty spot on. The story too, like I would say with Master Chief, it was interesting to see, what it is about his life that he doesn't know about. I think the Miranda Keyes thing with her mother was also interesting to watch. I thought that was some, captivating television with a daughter and her mother. Like, that was something that I don't think we've seen too much in science fiction. So that was also very, very, I would say, unique. But I also thought the Spartans too, Kai, she's one of the Spartans that deals with her own questions around her identity. That was an interesting storyline. I think one of the things I do wish the show did was I wish the Quan and Soren side plot was completely cut out of this show. It could have been saved for a second season. And I wish that all that time instead of spent on Quan and Soren, who at the end of the day in this season made they mattered. How do I say it? They didn't matter at all. Like they were useless. The only thing I will say is that they are building Quan for a season 2 of this show. But then again, that's a season 2, not a season 1. And season 1 did nothing to really, I think, engage us in Quan. I think that all that time spent on Quan could have been spent more on Cortana, because I think that Cortana is a great character and a great character in this series, that especially when we get to the season finale, she makes a huge choice that kind of felt a little rushed. Speaking of rushed, we can get to the character of Makee, who I would say, right next to Quan, is my least favorite character in this series. And one of the reasons why was because they establish a romance with her and Master Chief in the show after one episode of them meeting each other. And I'm sorry, but it felt rushed. It did not feel earned. It did not get me at all. I was not emotionally connected into these characters' relationships. And there's a lot of memes going online about Master Chief and how, he has sex in this show, and it was unnecessary, and just, I can understand why people are divided, because I don't see why they did this. Halo has never been a show about nudity or about sex. It's been never been a show. It's never been a game. It's a game with action. It's a game with, even language sometimes. But, if you, it's just, and especially and we can get into the game part, but Master Chief in the books and in the games has this idea of being a character that isn't naturally attracted sexually. That's the point of the Spartans. Their sex drives are kind of inhibited in some point. So it just feels off. It doesn't feel right. And it didn't quite go anywhere either. By the time they actually, because when they have sex, it's in the episode before the final episode. And then, I should have said this in the beginning, but spoiler alerts everywhere. And Makee dies in the finale. It's I don't know what they were doing. I don't know what they were doing. I don't know why they had a human character in the Covenant. I don't know why they couldn't focus on an Arbiter or another Covenant character. It didn't work for me. Also, I do not think that the finale for the season, it felt more like, okay, here's season 2, instead of this is the end of season 1. And I don't know, that was a disappointing angle. And then this is where I want to talk about, I think this is where we will go into this part 2. So now we're going to talk about the game section. The games are action games, okay? So we're talking about, Call of Duty, and you could throw Grand Theft Auto in there, but, all these other games like Battlefield and, Assassin's Creed and God of War, all these games are action games. And there's action in this show. Sometimes it's really good action, I believe it was in episode 4, where they have this awesome fight scene where the Covenant are attacking and Master Chief and the Spartans are fighting. The problem is, this show probably had, I would say, 30% action. And for Halo, as a fan of the games, I wanted more. I don't think that you need action the entire series, but you need more than 30% of the series. You need at least maybe 50. And it's to the point where, I mean, yeah, I didn't quite get bored watching episodes, but there were times where I didn't feel like I was watching Halo. I felt like I was just watching this random show on the CW that had less of the budget, because this is a show that the opening scene of the series is this gigantic action sequence of the Spartans, and it really cements you into it. And you really don't get much action after that until one episode with an army and then another episode later on. The previews of this show, I would say, mismarketed the series, because what they did was they took the first episode, specifically the first half an hour of that episode, which is filled with action, and that's all they teased. So it made you think that was going to be the show. They didn't show you the 9 hours of non-action in the show. So, I mean, it's not a big deal, but I do think that for season 2, I hope that they have even more action in it. I also hope, because this is Halo, and this is where we will get into, a lot of the divisiveness of this series, but I just want to see Master Chief in his helmet and his armor, because I understand, you can tell a story in a video game and you can tell a story in live action. And sometimes a character wearing the helmet in live action doesn't translate as well as the game. You need to see their face. I get that. The problem I have is how much he wasn't in this outfit in this series. There are at least, I think, 3 or 4 episodes where he isn't even in his armor. And I'm talking about to the point where all the other Spartans are, but not him. It just, to me, that really bothered me, because as someone that watches a show based on a video game that I really love, and someone that's so used to seeing Master Chief in the armor, I think of the Master Chief character in that armor, specifically the helmet. So when you have him not wearing the helmet for many, many episodes, it gets to the point where it doesn't feel like the character anymore. And the finale then decided to put him in the helmet, which was great, but they kind of did this thing where Cortana has now taken over his body, and is he even Master Chief anymore? It's now becoming, so distant from the games that I love. And as I said, as I said in the part 1 of this video, where I was discussing how on its show it has its own issues, I do like many of the character interactions. I do like some of the things they do with some of the characters, and the CGI and the action at times is good. But the thing is that a lot of times I was watching this show and it didn't feel like the game I loved. And there are many types of movies and TV shows where you've heard people say, this isn't what I grew up with. But I don't know, I just, as I said, I'm hoping season 2, they improve upon these things. I hope he's in his helmet more, because not only is that part of the character, but it looks so cool. They did a phenomenal job in the costume department on this show. I mean, there's a lot of things regarding the game, but I will say that I think that the music of the show, at first I was a bit apprehensive since it wasn't the original music from the games, but I think it was pretty good. The score was pretty good, and I like the way they included the music from the games into the show. I also really loved the designs of the Covenant, because I think they nailed them all. I was glad we saw Jackals, we saw Grunts, didn't exactly see the Hunters, but these characters exist in this world. I do also appreciate that they, do the first-person perspective for this game. I will say, though, I feel like they don't need to do that. I understand it's like almost like an Easter egg for the fans, but as a fan of the Halo games, I can appreciate when something isn't literally exactly like the game. In the case of doing a first-person perspective, it's all right if they do it one time, but like they did it a couple times in this show. I was like, I don't know, but yeah. So overall, I think that Halo as a series, I think that it is, I think, okay first season. It has its issues, but I think that season 2 could definitely improve upon them. I do hope, and hold on, let me get something here. Something fell. I do hope that, you know, they kind of focus more on what the games have and kind of, you know, become more true to what the games are, because this show, even though it did some, you know, some tribute, I want to see more. I want to see it more like the games. The characters, I'm fine with how, you know, we're being, you know, introduced to them, but I want to see more of the Master Chief I know from the games. I want to see more of the Covenant characters from the games. Please give us an Arbiter that you can focus on. I don't like how we watched a Halo series and the 3 characters it was focused on were all humans. It's science fiction. It's Halo. Focus on alien characters. I mean, it might be costly, but still, like, that's the fun of Halo. It's fun with the Covenant perspective. Yeah, so do I recommend the show? I don't know if I'd recommend it to get Paramount Plus, but if you have Paramount Plus, I'd recommend just to give it a watch, because I know some people that liked it, but I got Paramount Plus for the show, and I don't know, like, it could have been better, and it's just good to see that, you know, Halo's finally been adapted into live action in at least some type of medium, for like a TV show or a film. Yeah, so have you seen Halo? Have you watched the finale? What did you think of it? Are you a fan of Halo? Do you have your own issues with it? Let me know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching this video, and have a great day. Bye.